Hi everybody, it's Win, and welcome to another video by The Entropy System. Last night I went to go see It Chapter 2 in theaters, and immediately after finishing it decided that I was going to use that movie as the theme for today's video. What could a fictional evil clown possibly have to do with mental health, you ask? Well, the whole plot of It Chapter 2 is about adults trying to overcome and defeat the trauma of their childhood. As an actual adult who has had to deal with processing trauma from their childhood, I actually related a lot to what the characters were going through, and I thought I could use their plight as an illustration on how to properly approach processing traumatic memory. Just a heads up, major spoilers for the entire It Chapter 2 movie, so if you haven't seen it yet and you want to go see it spoiler-free, go ahead and come back to this video at a later time. This list is going to consist of 5 Pennywise points to make it theme friendly. So first Pennywise point is do not try to process trauma memories alone. In the movie, because Bill is struggling with the guilt of his brother's death, he decides to go and try to confront Pennywise on his own, which only leads to him being re-traumatized when he finds that by himself he is not strong enough or capable enough to face the evil clown. When PTSD and CPSD are formed, it is because the brain did not properly categorize a traumatic event into a memory. Processing trauma memory means that your brain is essentially re-experiencing the trauma in real time so that it can categorize that as a memory, and that trauma will no longer affect you as strongly as it did before. In easier to understand terms, you have to re-experience the trauma to get rid of the trauma. And that is absolutely not something that anyone should or can bear on their own. Working with a professional who specializes in trauma is essential when it comes to processing trauma memories. Pennywise point number 2, remember the source of the fear that you are feeling eventually gives you power over that fear. At the beginning of the movie, Mike calls all the rest of the losers who had moved out of Derry to ask them to come back. Because all of the losers had forgotten about their time with Pennywise, they're overcome with an intense sense of fear, but they have no idea where it's coming from. Even though it causes one of the characters to vomit and the other to lose control to the point where he gets in a car accident, they're not sure where the fear is coming from. It's only as the movie progresses and their memories of their time in Derry return that they're able to gain some sort of control over this fear and master it later on. In the beginning, when they have little to no memory, when Pennywise starts sending out all his weird, creepy illusions, they're terrified, screaming, don't know what to do, don't remember how to leave the room. Once they start remembering things and are able to put faces to the sources of their fear, like when they're out collecting their tokens for the sacrifice at the end of the movie, they're able to face these weird hallucinations that Pennywise puts up and remind themselves that this isn't real, that they are okay, and get those nightmarish visions to stop on their own. Applying that to actual trauma processing, once you are able to put a name and a face or a title to the source of the fear that you are feeling, you can then remind yourself that you are not in that place of trauma, that you are not experiencing that right now, that you are safe and you are capable and you are older, or whatever it is that separates you from that past. That's the kind of logic that is able to most powerfully contradict the trauma brain fear. Without having any idea where it comes from, the fear is just fear, and it can be all-consuming. Pennywise point number 3, the things that you are feeling afraid of in your memories are legitimate. As the losers start to experience flashbacks in their time in Derry, they experience fear at the hands of things that an outsider may not consider scary. Why were you afraid? That's just a little old lady. Why are you afraid? That's just a sick man. It doesn't matter what it might sound like to outsiders. If it was frightening to you as a child, then it is a legitimate traumatizing thing. Other people don't have to understand, and you don't have to justify it to them. While watching It Chapter 2, you can clearly see why a leper or an old lady in those situations were absolutely terrifying. Even seemingly mundane objects or events could be massively triggering to someone depending on what their trauma is. No matter what the source of that trigger may be, it is legitimate and is nothing that anyone should feel ashamed of. Pennywise point number 4, healing is not linear. When processing trauma memory, there will be a lot of ups and downs. There may be a point where you think you have remembered everything and you've gotten control of it, but then another repressed memory will come up and you suddenly feel like you're back at square one. There will be days when one trigger is something you can easily overcome and logic yourself out of, and then a day where the exact same thing leaves you crippled with fear. It would be great if we could just keep taking one step forward over and over again and then just progress in some kind of straightforward fashion, but that's just not the way things work. In It Chapter 2, the losers have to face Pennywise time and time again. After each individual event, the losers generally come out on top, only to find themselves facing Pennywise again later on. Just because he pops up again later doesn't diminish the fact that they did overcome his scare tactics previously. Every step forward and every battle won, no matter what comes later down the road, is a victory. Even if the trauma feels big and bad later on, that doesn't mean that the work you've done so far isn't worth it. And finally, Pennywise point number 5, it is possible to make the past small. Remember on the previous point where I talked about how things may not seem scary to outsiders that were traumatizing to you? Well, you can make it so those things aren't necessarily scary to you either. Once trauma has been processed and is categorized in the brain as memory instead of current event, it makes it much more possible for you to be bigger than that trauma and bigger than that fear. In the final face-off between the losers and Pennywise, they go at him telling him how small he is, that he's just a clown, that he's just an old lady, that he's nothing that can actually hurt them anymore. Because they're strong, they're adults, they have each other, and they have hope. I know when I personally am triggered, I remind myself how old I am, where I currently live, and how I'm able to take care of myself even if nobody else could. Reminding myself how small that trauma is now, after all the growth that I've done, helps me remain functional and overcome things that used to keep me at home crippled with anxiety and fear. Before and even during processing trauma memories like this, it might seem like the trauma is huge and undefeatable, but the more you move forward and the more these trauma memories are processed, the more you are able to look at the trauma and say, you are small, you don't have control over me anymore. And just like it was shown with the losers, doing this with the support of friends and loved ones makes it all exponentially easier to handle. And if you don't have someone in your life who you feel you can reach out to in this way, trauma survivor group therapy is a pretty great option. It's something that I went to for at least a couple years, and it made a very big impact in my ability to grow past what had happened to me. Before I sign off, I'd like to give a big thank you to Elizabeth and all of our patrons for supporting this channel and helping us create the educational content that we do. If you're interested in supporting the channel in that way, a link to our Patreon is in the description below. We also have really cool merch like t-shirts and stickers and even socks, so if you're interested in supporting the channel that way, a link to our Teespring is in the description below as well. Remember everyone, you are loved, you are valuable, and you are valid. Have a great day. Bye!